Are you a consultant or coach who feels like your results are stuck and your vision is stalled out because you're just not clear on what is your ideal and most profitable niche? Well, this is the episode for you. Tune in now to discover the secrets to pinpointing that unique niche that leverages your passions, gets your results in flow, and attracts the clients you'd love to work with. And welcome to the Enough Ready podcast. This is the show for consultants and coaches who want to forge their own paths to success in their businesses, in their careers, in their lives. I'm your host, Betsy Jordan. I'm a business mentor, and I'm a brand messaging strategist for remarkable consultants and coaches and their unique strengths. You can find out more about my personal branding services on my website at www.betsyjordan.com. And don't forget, Jordan's with a Y. And today what we're doing is I'm continuing with my series that I'm calling From Career to Calling. So what this series is all about is how do you start and grow a consulting or coaching business that is, yes, profitable, but also in alignment with your unique purpose. And today, we're getting into that hidden barrier that keeps smart, amazing, remarkable consultants and coaches from building the brand and attracting clients, which is all about the lack of clarity on their niche. So in my 10 years plus as a business mentor and a brand messaging strategist, I see this all the time. I would tell you the majority of my clients have this challenge and are often conflicted about solving this challenge. So let's talk about that. So on the one hand, I think we all know on some level that we can't serve everybody, right? As consultants and coaches, we kind of think like, oh yeah, what I do really could help anybody. I could help any organization, anybody who needs coaching. But deep down, we kind of know that it's important that we need to get clear about who we help and how we're different so that we can stand out in the market and attract more of the right clients. But on the other hand, choosing a niche stirs up all these other fears. Like if I choose a niche, will I leave money and opportunity on the table, or am I going to limit the strengths and expertise I can offer? Today, we're going to clear up these concerns because the truth is, with a clear niche, you're not only going to be able to attract more of the right clients, but also use all of your strengths. So I could tell you with 100% confidence, that concern is really a myth. It's a false narrative that we have that keeps us stuck and spinning. So we want to turn this around. And believe me, I get this. I get the fears of choosing a niche, and I understand the cost. So in this series, I shared a lot about my story, about how I left Disney and I started my own consulting business. And unfortunately, it was not the right one. I mean, it was great because it was successful, but it wasn't the right one. And then I talked about what I did to pivot. Well, what I haven't really talked to you about is how much money and time and energy I spent to pivot my business and how I was going about it and how I did not clarify a niche when I did that. So when I pivoted my business, my thought is like, you know what? I know a lot about organizational consulting. I'm going to create a course to train other consultants on my best practices. There's going to be a ton of consultants who would just love to learn my secrets to how I help Disney executives and other Fortune 100 executives and all that kind of stuff. So I thought, well, of course, everybody's going to want that. And I went to work with Chad, my web guy, to help me record all of these videos. And he's talking to me and he's like, okay, so what's your passion? Who do you want to help with this? I'm like, well, anyone who wants my OD best practices. And he's like, well, no, but who are you trying to help? Who are you passionate about helping here? I'm like, anybody who wants my OD best practices. And then he made a comment that I never forgot, which I love Chad and I love the intention behind it. But he said, well, Betsy, we all have our failures. And so the long story short, I launched that course. And it did not sell like hotcakes because I didn't do the good work up front to figure out who this course was for. And I did not figure out what this business was all about. And it did not work out the way that I expected it to. So Chad was right. So let me tell you what I did differently. So once I stopped pushing into the market what I wanted to sell and started listening to what people who came to me, what they actually wanted from me, everything changed. That is really how I created this successful pivot from the consulting and executive coaching I was doing before to the brand messaging that I do now, as I started listening and I started paying attention to who was coming to me naturally, who was I uniquely motivated to help, and what was the problem I really wanted to solve. And so the coolest thing about this is what I really wanted to do, match what the market wanted from me, but I just didn't trust it beforehand. So there's so much power in figuring out your niche, because ultimately when you get the right one, it's going to really reflect the work that you want to do. So I'd love for you to think about this episode as my special gift to you to save you from making my mistakes. One thing I tell everybody in my one-on-one mentoring is, you can make your own mistakes. The same thing I tell my kids. You can make your own mistakes. Just be creative. Just don't make mine. So all of this is my gift to you just to save you from making my mistakes. And I also want to set you up to experience all the benefits of a clear niche. There's so many things that you're going to get when you're super clear on who you serve and how you're different. That clarity and focus is worth everything, because once you know this, everything else that you need to do to grow your business will become much more obvious, and you'll be able to get into flow. You'll be able to differentiate yourself because you'll see how you as a consultant or coach are different than everybody else. Your marketing, it's about to get a lot easier. Just even in the basics, where you're going to be able to help those people who are referring you to be more effective in doing that. You're going to equip them with the right abilities and the words to know, yes, I want to refer you to this new client. And also all the other things that you need to do to attract those clients. You'll build your credibility and your authority, which will translate to higher fees. You're going to build trust and loyalty with your clients, and you'll achieve scalability and so much more. So I want to help you get all of these benefits. And I want you to think about it from a consumer standpoint. So you're listening to my show right now. Does it matter to you that I'm a business mentor, not just for everybody, but I'm really dedicated to consultants and coaches? I do know that all businesses need a brand strategy and messaging, but does it matter that I'm dedicated to consultants and coaches? So if it matters to you, then figuring out your niche will matter to your future clients. So just always remember, would you rather work with a generic therapist, let's say, who helps everybody, or somebody that was very specific to your demographic and your unique needs? That's what that's what the benefit of niching does for you. To help you out with this, I also have a freebie that I'd love for you to grab. It's my What I Do script, and how do you get the words to describe what you do whenever you're at a networking event or a party, or anytime you run into somebody at the grocery store and they ask you, what do you do? This is how we start getting the words around it. So head on over to www.betsyjordan.com/template-value-proposition. I'm going to have this in the show notes so you can see the link there, so you can go ahead and grab that freebie, which will also help you take in the information that I'm sharing with you today and then put it into practice. So let's get into the content, and let's get into the steps around how do you nail your niche and identify your ideal client. The first step to figure out your niche, your first step is to clear up any misconceptions you have about what a niche is. So a niche is not simply picking out of the myriads of things that you can offer and all the skills that you have and just choosing one and building a business around it. It's not your methodology. It's not your certifications or tools. So if you have, let's say, a certification in DISC or Myers-Briggs or StrengthsFinder or something like that, that's not your niche. That's a tool in your toolbox, but that is not your niche. And that's not how you're going to necessarily stand out. It's also not a company or just one aspect of client demographics. So a lot of times when I work with consultants, they're like, oh, I help companies. Well, that's too broad. What does that mean? Who do you help? What's the problem you solve? Or if you're going to say, oh, well, I help, women or men or something, you have one aspect of a demographic. That's not enough. So that's not a niche. That's just too broad. A niche is a person with a problem that you're motivated to solve. So it's all around, there's a person with a situation and there's a context for your help and when that's needed. So to figure out your niche, it's in your brand and everything that you do, it's always about who you serve first, then what. That is what the benefit of creating a niche is that you don't try to figure out like, okay, here's what I do and I'm going to be a hammer looking for nails out there. You figure out who you want to help, the problem you're solving, and then who else is solving that problem for that person today? Where are they falling short? That's what your unique competitive niche is. So let's say, for example, you're a coach. As I mentioned, it doesn't matter if you have like a certification in, let's say, StrengthsFinder. Your niche isn't that you're a StrengthsFinder coach. Your niche is the person with a specific problem that perhaps identifying their strengths might be a part of a helpful solution. So your niche could be a lot of different things. It might be an emerging executive who wants to land an executive position, but that's getting passed over for promotions. And then perhaps understanding their strengths will help them create that promotion among a bunch of other things that you're going to offer. Or maybe it's a successful leader who hit the top of their profession and now wants to add significance to their work and build a career around their strengths. Same skill set, different context. That's what a niche is it's really around the person that you want to help and the problem you solve. And StrengthsFinder is a tool. It's a helpful tool, but it's not a niche. Let's say you're a consultant. Your niche is not an organization in general. It's the person within a specific type and size organization who has a problem that you want to solve. So it could be that you have a niche that's focused on founders of family-owned businesses who are looking to turn their startup business into one that is set up for sustainability and scale. Or maybe you work with CHROs in large complex organizations who are trying to maintain their industry leadership status, but struggle with silos and duplication of effort and departments at odds with one another. So you have similar skills, but you applied in a different context, and that creates a different type of value proposition, and again, a different type of niche. So that is the difference between a niche. It's about a niche is who in the problem, not necessarily what you do at that point in time. So just take a moment and think about, like now that you know what a niche is, does it bring up relief to you? It's like, oh, okay, that's great. I don't have to leave any part of me, off the table. I could bring all of me into my business, or does it create objections? If you're a lot of consultants and coaches I'm working with, chances are there's definitely some objections and they all make sense. So the step 2 then is once you understand that a niche is a person with a problem, your next step is to overcome your objections to picking that niche. So here's some of the objections. One of the objections might be I'm a consultant or coach. I can help anybody who needs expert advice. But here's some hard but necessary truth, a little tough love. No consultant or coach is the perfect fit for every client situation and need. And you don't want to help everyone. If you want to love your business, it begins with loving your clients. And there's some people, you might care about all of them, but some you care more about than others. Some are a better fit for you. Like, for example, for me, it's not just consultants and coaches, but I tend to work with sages. I tend to work with people who are head people, analytical people, much more around they like step by step. That is another element of my niche. And so I work really well with them. They're my best clients. Yes, of course, I could work with the warrior types who just want to get immediate results. And yes, I could work with the caretakers who really just have that heart-centeredness to them. And my clients have all of those elements. But the ones that I do the best work with are the analytical people, the step-by-step people. And so that's important because it's important for you to know that this is the best situation where I can do my best work. Objection number 2. Big one. If I choose an ideal client, won't I be leaving money and opportunity on the table? Here's the fact, though. If you don't choose an ideal client, you will be leaving money and opportunity on the table. So if you are not clear on who your ideal client is and what your niche is, then you're going to be stuck with those hit or miss marketing results and conversion challenges which really jacks up your results and messes with your self-esteem and so much more. So you definitely want to get over that objection. Here's the third objection. But Betsy, why do I need to do this? Can't I just go out there and find clients? That advice is a very common piece of advice. And I'll just say this, getting out there and just finding clients can work for a while until it stops. Until you get really clear on your target audience, you're going to have a very hard time scaling your profits, doing any ads or getting leads from any organic search. It's just going to make things so much harder. And as I mentioned, there's not a lot of fun that comes with hit or miss results. So I want you to think for a second, do you have any of these objections, or are there other objections you might have? And what can you do to overcome those objections so that you can actually really get clear on who your ideal client is and your best and most profitable niche? Step 3 in the process, use one or all of my 5 strategies to start to figure out who is your ideal niche. So the way I look at these strategies and the way I think about anything that goes with figuring out your ideal client or your niche is this phrase that I use all the time with my clients is, if I had it all my way. So I want you to think about, as I go through these strategies, is that you want to be clear as if I had it all my way, if I could fill my pipeline with this particular person and it was totally full with this kind of person, who would this person be? So these are the 5 strategies to get to that. And the thing about your ideal client is we just need to pay attention to who this person is who happens to already be in your orbit. If your ideal client is not likely to be out of your orbit. It's not going to be someone or some problem that you have no experience in any way, shape, form. It's going to be a person who is in your orbit. And what you're looking for is who's the person in the problem? Who is the person I want to help and what's the context for your help? And the thing about your person and problem is you'll know that it's the right one is that when you see this person or you see who this ideal client is in this niche, it sparks you to compassion and action. Yes, you care about everybody. And so you have compassion, but are you motivated to jump in and say, I really want to help that person? That's what you're listening for. And the thing is about that compassion and action, that goes along with the word passion. And in my world, I believe passion isn't what you love, it's what you hate. It's when you see a person with a problem and you feel in your gut, it shouldn't be like this. Somebody needs to do something about this. If you feel those feelings, you are on the right track to figuring out who your ideal client is. So again, you're listening for, you care about all kinds of people and problems. I know you do because you're a heart-centered person. As much as you're probably a sage, you're also a heart-centered person. But there's some people you care more about than others and some that will care more about what you do, that you're a fit. For example, when I was a consultant, I worked with all kinds of companies. I worked with a produce company, Sonobuoy manufacturers, outsourced service for airlines and all kinds of companies. But it wasn't until I landed my multi-year gig with Wyndham when I realized the psychic cost of not choosing a niche. I didn't do that when I was a consultant. I didn't know as much about this marketing and branding world back then as I do now. And I think I learned a lot about this because some of my mistakes back then. But once I got into Wyndham, it was like, I feel at home, hand in glove fit. It was a large, complex organization in the sales and hospitality industry, which totally fit my background. I grew up in retail. My parents had a chain of shoe stores in Chicago, and I grew up in the retail world. And I spent most of my career working at Disney at the time, which is all about hospitality and entertainment. And it fit. I understood their language and I really loved it. So the thing is about when you also, another test. So there's a test that you could say is like, okay, this is the right niche for me, is like where I feel sparked to compassion and action, feel motivated, my passion is ignited. I also would say specifically for consultants, I would use my walk the floor test. So every new client you're going to work with is going to ask you to walk the floor, which means familiarize yourself with their business. So for when I would have to go to the production floors, it was so difficult for me to say, oh, wow, you engineered that. That's so cool. Or, oh, this is your production line. Oh, look at, here's your numbers. Like it was really hard. But when I got with Wyndham, as I mentioned, is I loved it because they sent me to go stay at their hotel. I'm like, this is amazing. And I thought, well, everybody would love to work with Wyndhams who are going to send them to resorts. But then I started working with Dave on his branding. And he felt the opposite. He's like, oh my gosh, I would love to go to the production floors. I would love to see these manufacturers and how they do these things. And he felt the opposite. He's like, I don't care about going to the resort. I could just pay my own way to a resort. I don't really care. And I'm like, oh, so that's when this was early on in my branding work, is like, oh, I really realized that it's very important that to be cognizant of yourself because everybody's different. So hence, this is my walk the floor test. So if you're a consultant, that's a good one for you as well. So here's the 5 strategies. The first strategy is just analyze your current clients. So if you are currently a consultant or coach, just pay attention to your clients and think about who are you having your best success with? Who do you love working with? When they pop up on your calendar, who are you most excited with? And then also look at who pops up in your calendar and you're like, oh, I have to have a meeting with them. That sounds awful. Get really clear. So for example, I was working with Katie. I mention Katie a lot because she's amazing. But one of the things that she worked on as we got through our branding work and figuring out her ideal client is the people she constantly they were flocking to her. Like, what is it? Like the bees to honey kind of thing. Like the flies to something else. I don't know the nature analogies, the bees to honey thing. And everybody who is in continuous improvement, operational excellence, people who are like her, who are really passionate about building a thriving learning culture, that was her ideal client. It was right there. She just didn't see it. So we had to bring it out and put it in our marketing, but it was right there. And so if you're a current consultant or coach, just pay attention. Look at your client list and see who do you love and what do they all have in common? What's the problem that they have? And I'm guessing that there's some things that they all have in common. If you don't have any formal clients yet, let's do my strategy 2. Look at who you helped in your past career. So just pay attention. Internal bosses, internal clients, colleagues, people who come to you from time to time. Just notice, what do they all have in common? What is the consistency in their demographics, and what are the problems that they tend to bring you in, whether it was part of your formal role or not? For example, I work with Lori, and Lori is somebody who came out of the finance department, got her Lean Six Sigma certifications, and what she wound up doing is just informally, is she was invited constantly to help these executives in her organization prioritize their goals and their strategic initiatives. So she brought both the process side and the finance side, and people were constantly tapping into it. And she also has this really great mediator side to her. And so, but the problem that she was trying to help people solve, that she still was motivated with her business, is how she helps that. So that's what she clarified was her niche. Something that she was doing informally in her organization that brought together a lot of her different skill sets, but when she applied it to a specific problem, a person with a problem, growth-oriented senior executives who are looking to accelerate the achievement of their goals by aligning, optimizing, prioritizing, and integrating their strategic initiatives and objectives. Looking at Keith is another example. So he's an entertainer turned HR executive turned consultant. What makes sense for him, his niche, are definitely visionary leaders in the creative industries, in the entertainment industry, hospitality industries. That is a perfect niche for him. So just pay attention. If you don't have formal clients yet, look at your past career. Strategy number 3, just simply pay attention to who you're motivated to help and who's drawn to you. So to me, this is a little bit of calendar analysis, or people who just, give you rave reviews on LinkedIn or what have you. Just pay attention to who you're drawn to. So for example, I worked with Scott, and Scott was a fractional CFO, and he was working with a lot of different kinds of companies. And what really jazzed him up was working with the crypto industry and the tech, anything that's emerging tech. So he kept surrounding himself with people who love like SpaceX as a new industry, crypto industry, these visionary forward-thinking, like techie kind of business owners. Loved it, fits his background, fits his personality. And so getting clarity on his niche also helped him transform his perception, and rather than being like, oh, I'm a fractional CFO for generically any entrepreneur, he became a CFO on demand for these specific types of companies. You could look at myself and say, where my niche is I'm all about consultants and coaches. It's not rocket science. I have 30 plus years of experience I can't believe I have 30 plus years of experience in anything in the consulting or coaching industry. And the problem that I've always been motivated to solve is when people are not clear about their value and how to put words. Like when people have a bunch of ideas that are bouncing around in their heads, whether it relates to their content, whether it relates to what is it they want to create strategically, anytime they got a million ideas that are bouncing on their head and they want some help putting words to it, that's where I always come in. So that's where I created my niche. Strategy number 4, if none of these things are working for you, one of the things I also recommend is simply make a collage that expresses an image of your ideal client. So some of you might be tuning me out and saying, okay, Betsy, that's way too woo. I'll tell you, it really works. So I did some work with Kimberly. So she is an educational leader, and she was trying to figure out what she wanted her business to be about. And she was stuck. We weren't exactly sure what it was. And so what she did is we got a bunch of magazines out. She started looking at whatever images that were speaking to her, and she set the intention of say, okay, ideal client, reveal yourself to me. She made a little collage around it. We interviewed it, and then we worked on the rest of her ideal client, and it was like, bam. What she wanted to really, the problem is who she wanted to help were the teachers primarily, and she wanted to help them with all of the stresses that are impacting teaching today. And so she got really clear is like, well, how do you sustain your love for teaching in the midst of this crazy environment? She's in Florida, so there was a lot of different issues. But my point is that the collage really sparked her thinking. And then she's not turned back from that passion. And then here's the hack, the most important strategy. Number 5 is when you're in doubt, especially if you're a coach, it's a younger version of you. A lot of times we want to help people achieve something in a way that avoids all of the costs that we had when we were doing something different when we were younger. So as I introduced this whole thing, it's like, wow, I started the wrong business. I spent a lot of money and time pivoting my business. I'm very passionate about helping people start the right business. The first time, it's because I had a lot of pain getting to this point and I want to help people avoid it. So there's this whole principle that you heal yourself by helping others avoid the pain that you have experienced in the past. And so a lot of people want to do that is like, wow, I want to help, like Denise wants to help women get to the top spot as in technology, but she wants to help them do so in a way without burning out. Rochelle, I've talked about on this show before. She's a coach that helps like high achieving people, achieve breakthrough success without burnout because of her personal experience of burning out. Adam really wants to help men create amazing lives because they lost it on the sake of growing their career. Why? Because he went through that same thing and he wants to help people avoid the pain that he went through. So when in doubt, many times your ideal client is a younger version of you. So think about that for a second. So now we went through the 5 strategies. Are you clear on who you want to serve? Who is your niche? Who is the person you want to help and the problem that you want to solve? That is the first step. It's not your complete ideal client archetype. We need to get more information in order to complete the ideal client archetype that you will use to guide you in your business and the rest of your branding. But that is the first step. After you're done with that, then you can get into all the other aspects. You can get more clarity on, okay, so this is the person, I kind of generically know who they are. Then you really want to get into their demographics, their personality, how they roll, what's the problems, more specifically the pain points, and then really the limitations, like what's causing them to not solve this problem. Like where are they going today that's not really working? But all of that will come if you can get clarity on, who is this person? I'm not going to lie, figuring out your ideal client is the most challenging part of the brand building work I do with my clients. But I'll tell you, once you see this, it changes everything. And how do you know that you've done this work to the best of your ability? How do you know that it's complete? I use my Lin-Manuel Miranda test. I love him. I love Hamilton. It's that if he was going to create the next Hamilton, could he cast your ideal client? Would he have enough information to cast your ideal client in a role? That's how you know if it's that clear that somebody can write a story about their life. How you know it's complete. Like when I do the branding work with my clients, my test is this clear enough? Is if I know how to refer this person. If I know, like when they describe it, it's like, okay, this is the niche. This is who I want to help. This is a problem I solve. And it's like, oh yeah. And I could think of 3 other people I can introduce them right away. But then when they change the words a little bit and they're like, oh, I go in this way. And it's like, if I'm clear, unclear. So for example, I was working with one of my clients the other day and her niche is really the nonprofit and government sector. And she really helps them with complex strategic change projects and problems. And that's felt clear to me. I could see that. Then she changed the language to be more like, I help mission-driven leaders, just improve performance. Like, okay, I don't know who to refer you to. So the other positioning to me was stronger. The other way that you know it's complete is the connection test for you. Do you feel sparked to compassion and action? If you say yes, you've done a good job. So your first step is to clarify this niche. Second, complete your ideal client archetype. Once you're done with all of that, now we're going to add you into the picture. Then you got to get clear on why you're the perfect person to help this client. What do you do? What's the unique value of what you do? You got to craft your foundational messages and manifest all of this on your online platform. Use these messages to attract and land clients. But everything begins with this niche. So let's review. What did we just talk about? Number 1, accept that your niche and your brand are about first who, then what. Get the order wrong, you'll struggle with copywriting and your marketing. Get the order right. You'll set yourself up for brand clarity, copywriting flow, and greater marketing and sales ease. Number 2, work through your objections. You're going to have them. I had them. We all have them at some point in time. We have that fear of missing out. We have that whole scarcity thing that goes on. We have a lot of things that happen. Just work through your objections. And then just use one or more of my 5 strategies to get started on identifying your ideal client. But what I would just suggest you do as next steps, just to get started, just start by paying attention. When people call you out of the blue and say, "Oh, can you help me?" Just pay attention to them and then just ask a few more questions. Instead of saying, "Oh, sure, I could help you," ask them, "What problem did you have that motivated you to reach out to call me? Why me? Tell me a little bit more about the problem though. How are you experiencing this problem? What's at risk for you?" The more you ask those kinds of questions about the problem, the better off you'll be. Another thing you could do is just do your own little social inventory. Go check out your folder that you might still have with all of the compliments you have and the letters and the rave reviews, performance reviews. Go look at your LinkedIn and see all the recommendations and try to see if you can see the through line between what people have and look through the compliments. I would love for you to see the compliments about how great you are. But what I would encourage you to do is kind of put that to the side and try to get more focused on what do these people have in common and what do they say about the context for your help and what is it that they say is the value that you created. And also to help you get started on really getting these words to describe the value, for sure check out my value proposition template. It's at betsyjordan.com/template-value-proposition. To clarify where you might get stuck though, I just want to be clear on where you're going to get stuck. We all get stuck here. I want to make sure I end with this validation that you understand where you might get stuck. And the number 1 is feeling like you don't know anyone who is your ideal client. And the truth is your ideal client is always in your orbit. I promise you they are always in your orbit in some way. You're going to get stuck with those scarcity fears and the fear of missing out. And the thing is if you're talking to everyone, you're talking to no one, and then you'll really be missing out. And then finally, where else you might get stuck? That nose to the window pane syndrome. Sometimes we are just too close to what our passions are, what our strengths are, that we can't see them. The reality is sometimes we need to get outside support because it's really hard to see the label from inside the jar. So if that's the case, love to help you out. If you want to work with someone like me, or actually not like me because I'm me. If you would love my personal help, head on over to my website at www.betsyjordan.com. You'll see a big box at the top where you can book a call with me and let's chat about this. So what's coming next in this series? I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to use archetypes to build a strong and unique brand and hacks. I'm going to give you some hacks to come up with language that will resonate with your clients. So wherever you're listening, subscribe now so you don't miss it. And until next time, remember, you have enough, you do enough, and you are enough. I'll see you soon.